doesn't get the musician thing off. Right, it's hard for people. So this morning we're on our last hindrance, doubt. And of course, this has got a special meaning in Buddhism. It's not doubting whether your friend's going to visit for the summer holidays or doubting whether it's going to rain later today or whatever. It's having doubt about the teachings, about the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Like, are these teachings correct? Are they helpful? Are they useful? Are they right for me? Are they the right teachings for me? Or it's self-doubt about those things, like, okay, maybe the teachings are good, but can I do it? Am I capable? So that's what we're meaning by doubt. And the Pali word for this is Vichikita. Vichikika. Did I say it right?
Vichikita.
Vichikita. Thank you. Vichikita. They have such fun names for the hindrances. So other words that we can use besides doubt can be perplexity, uncertainty, confusion, indecision. And the Buddha gave analogies, water analogies for all of them. And this is sort of like the heaviest. The analogy is a pot of muddy water that's in a closet, like this in the dark. So at least the others maybe were out in the sunlight. They maybe had wind ruffling the surface or dye or, algae growing on it. But this has got mud and it's in the dark. So it's, really giving you the idea that you just haven't a clue what's going on. So doubt is a form of not knowing. So it's closely related to delusion. And in Pali, that's moha or ignorance, avidya. So these other two other terms in Buddhism. And so it's very close to those two. We have, when we're born into the world, we're born with 7 underlying dispositions, and apparently doubt is one of those. And then when we awaken like enlightenment. We awaken in 4 different stages, and you cut off fetters. So there's these 10 fetters, and we cut off 3 of them for the first level of awakening. We weaken 2 at the second. We cut those off at the third, and then we cut off the final 5 at the end. And doubt is one of the 10 fetters, and it's one of the first 3 that goes with the first level of awakening. So when you enter the stream, which is the terminology for the first level of awakening, then you no longer have any doubt. So Ajahn Thiradhammo, in his book, he talks about different kinds of doubt. So the first kind he talks about is skeptical doubt. And that's wondering, are these teachings helpful? Is the training helpful? And if we feel this kind of doubt, it can really disincline us to put effort into testing out the training, like trying it out. On the other hand, if we can get curious, we have some doubt, but we get curious, then it can encourage us to delve even deeper and investigate, explore. So it doesn't necessarily have to be bad, but it could go one way or the other. Self-doubt I mentioned, like, can I do it? Am I doing it right? Another type of doubt that Ajahn Thiradhammo talks about is confusion. So that's, you hear the teachings, but you don't really understand. You don't really understand them, or you're not too sure how to put them into practice. The next category of doubt is worry and indecision. So this is persistent doubt about what negative things can happen in the future. So because of that, then you're indecisive about what to do in this moment. And this is contrasted with persistent thinking about positive possibilities. So that's called fantasizing. And then the final category he talks about is fear and anxiety. So if you're, really having a hindrance attack of doubt, it has the potential of causing fear to arise because you don't know what to do. And so then you can become fearful or anxious. So what's the cause of doubt? So I think this applies to all the hindrances. It's giving inappropriate attention to things that arouse doubt in the mind. So it may be just a little kernel in there, but then if you're giving a lot of inappropriate attention to it, then it can grow. In our culture, we're taught that clever thinking will yield all the answers. But if we start thinking or speculating about the Buddhist teachings, our mind can start proliferating and then just totally get out of control with speculations that are totally divorced from reality. So we have to be careful of that tendency to proliferate. In Buddhism, there are 3 modes of understanding: thinking, learning, and experiential realization through meditation. So the first 2, thinking and learning, we filter these 2 through our self-interpretations. So we can really color them or perceive them incorrectly, depending on our past experience or whatever, and how we interpret what we think about or what we're learning. But in the experiential realization through meditation, this, when we quiet the mind and still the mind, then this allows us to see beyond the limitations of self-interpretation. The Buddha actually saw doubt as normal. He discouraged people from believing things too easily. And he encourages us to test out the teachings so that we see the truth for ourselves. We don't just blindly believe something that's said to us. You have enough faith in the teaching to put some effort into practicing it, and then you get to see the results, experience the results for yourself. Oh, I just need to run and get the book because I want to read a section. So this is the famous sutta called the Kalama Sutta. The Buddha went to visit this group of people, and they questioned him. They said, we have all these various spiritual leaders that come through, and they'll say, my way is right, everybody else's way is wrong, and everybody's saying this. So who do we believe? How do we figure this out? So the Buddha says, now look, Kalamas, do not be led by oral sayings or tradition or hearsay, nor by the authority of scriptures, nor by reasoning or inference, nor by reasoned reflection, nor by accepting a view after pondering, nor by conformity, nor because you respect these teachers. When, Kalamas, you understand yourselves, these things are unskillful. These things are blameworthy. These things are censured by the wise. These things, if undertaken, lead to harm and suffering. Then abandon them. What do you think, Kalamas, when greed, aversion, delusion arises in a person? Does it arise to their welfare or harm? And they answer, to their harm, Venerable Sir. When, Kalamas, you know yourselves, these things are skillful. These things are blameless. These things are praised by the wise. These things, when undertaken, lead to welfare and happiness. Then abide with them. What do you think, Kalamas, when non-greed, non-aversion, non-delusion arises in a person? Does it arise to their welfare or harm? And they answer, to their welfare, Venerable Sir. That's in the Anguttara Nikaya 1, number 188. Now, the Buddha named 4 topics as inconceivables, meaning that these aren't things that we can figure out by thinking about them. So he's saying if we develop some doubt around one of these inconceivables, he just discourages us from trying to figure it out because, according to him, it's impossible. And so just best to just drop that. So the inconceivables are the sphere of a Buddha. So everything that a Buddha is able to sort of know and understand or whatever, we can't really conceive of that. The domain of the jhanas, I'm assuming this means for someone who has not experienced them. Then how can you think about them or conceive them? And then this one's important. The results of intentional actions. So actions are kama, and then their result is vipaka. So the term is kama vipaka. And we don't know what's going to result from that because it so depends on what we do after. Like maybe we do something very unskillful. But if we recognize that, we have our remorse and then we really make an effort to change our unskillful behavior, it's like you really dilute whatever that past action was. I mean, if you continue to do all these unskillful actions, then you're sort of building them up. But if you recognize this has happened and you make an effort to change your behavior, and then you do so many, kind or generous or non-harming kinds of actions after that, you really dilute that. And so the outcome can change, the vipaka can change from that. And then there are things that just happen in the world, like tsunamis or earthquakes or whatever. So it has nothing to do with what an individual sort of action has been in the past. Another inconceivable is speculation about the nature of the world. And then questions like, is the world eternal or not? Infinite or not? Is the life force the same as the body? Or does the Buddha exist after death? So if you develop doubt about these, then you just have to have a little chat with yourself and say, there's no answers to these. And do your best to let it go. Doubt can arise from ignorance of reality, believing things are permanent when all conditioned things are impermanent, or not realizing that pleasant things are unsatisfactory in the end because they end, because they're not permanent. Or belief in some solid self rather than what we call a self just being a flow of results from causes and conditions. So not understanding these realities, this can create doubt in us. Sometimes doubt can lead to us grabbing onto a fixed view as a defense. We don't want to, like maybe a little bit of doubt starts to arise, and then we don't, it's uncomfortable. We don't want to feel it. And so then you grab onto some kind of a fixed view to give yourself a feeling of stability or reassurance. And this can be the basis of fundamentalism. And then if you do this, it's kind of an unconscious thing, so that you have no awareness of the underlying doubt. So there's no way that you can resolve it through investigation, because it's sort of unconscious. Indecision, this can be caused by worrying about every single possible outcome. And there's so many possibilities that you're unable to decide what to do. So we need to follow some kind of middle way. You don't want to just compulsively rush into things, but then you don't want to take forever to come to a decision. So you just have to gather some information and just make the best choice you can with the information you have at the moment. So what are some of our antidotes here to doubt? So a big one is talking to a teacher, someone, a learned person, studying the suttas, and then investigation. The second factor of awakening is investigation. So the Buddha, in that part that I read you from Ajahn Thiradhammo's book, he was asking the Kalamas to investigate, when I'm following things like greed, aversion, and hatred, what's the outcome? And they can feel that this is not a positive outcome. And then when they're following the opposite of that, kindness and generosity, non-harming, then they can see the benefit from that. So investigation is a biggie. So you can look at, was following the teachings of the Buddha, has that been decreasing suffering in my life? It sure has in mine. If you have right view, so right view is the Four Noble Truths, understanding that there is suffering and that it's caused by desire. So have you noticed that? Have you noticed how desire can increase suffering in your life? And then when you're able to put that down, how it decreases. impermanence, the reality of impermanence. You see examples of that. Are you able to accept impermanence, or do you get really upset every time something breaks down or wears out or gets lost or whatever, or ends? If it's an event. And how about the teaching on conditionality, cause and effect? Of course, this is a very complex. Conditionality is very complex, and we're not going to be able to see all of the causes and conditions or be aware of them. But in more simple ways, have you been able to observe cause and effect? And the quality of our mind has such a major influence on what effect things have on us. So you can know that if you're feeling really good and somebody grumps at you, it hardly affects you at all. But if you're tired or stressed or sleep deprived and somebody grumps at you, it can have a major effect. And can you accept that things are uncertain, that you're not in control? So as I mentioned, doubt can be a stimulus for deeper inquiry. So that's using doubt in a very positive way. So examining, and if it's self-doubt, if we examine our self-doubt, that can be very useful. It can reveal our habit energies and our attitudes. On the other hand, if you're doubting if you're receiving benefit from the practice, then that's the time to ask, talk to a teacher. Maybe you need to change your meditation object, or maybe you've misunderstood the teachings and you're putting in, excessive effort, and that's sort of blocking progress. And this is what I are trying to do now on the moon days, at the beginning and the end of each moon day, to look at these issues. If it's confusion, if doubt is sort of manifesting as confusion, then Ajahn Thiradhammo says the main thing you want to do is sit down and meditate, still the mind, clear the mind. That'll be the first step. And then he says it helps if you're confused, to simplify and organize your life. Living in a clean, orderly environment. Doing one thing at a time and finishing it before moving on to another project. I have 3 things going on in my bedroom. So being careful not to take on too much, because that can get confusing if you're trying to juggle too many balls at once. And making sure you're aware of your priorities. Okay, so those were all the words I had about doubt. So we can open it up for discussion. Yes.
Thank you for that. Sanghamitta. I love that the Buddha said, don't. My interpretation of what the Buddha said was, don't believe me, investigate for yourself.
It's exactly what he said.
Doubt sort of never felt like it came up for me before in sort of my investigation of the Dharma, but and this is sort of just random thoughts I've had while you're speaking, and I haven't really sort of probably formulated them, in sort of a better way to talk about them, but one of my wonderings, is that a word, wonderings? Sure, it's a word. Doubt is that, is there room for interpretation of these ancient teachings now for time and place? That's just a thought. Let's maybe get them all out. And then you sort of spoke about, worry and fear and anxiety, and I felt like I wasn't living in that place as much anymore, but I feel sometimes now every single person I speak to has all of this worry and fear and anxiety about what's going on in the world right now, like never before.
Mm-hmm.
There's more fundamentalism in Alberta that I've ever seen in my life, which is scary, which is, we feel like sometimes we were granted these rights to marry or love who we love, but those are all almost threatened now too.
Mm-hmm.
So you say inappropriate attention and tendency to proliferate, but if you're paying attention to reality, which is actually what's sort of happening there. And then the only other thing I'll say is, you mentioned about the tsunamis, and they aren't individuals' actions of the past. And, scientifically, we know that our actions of the past are creating reality of what's happening.
A group, yeah, so definitely a group action, but not what I was trying to get at there is not blaming an individual, saying, well, they must have done something horrible because they died in that earthquake or that tsunami or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But collectively, collectively and individually, our actions have caused this. So that is our karma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think so too. Yeah, I read a book by Venerable Ayuto. But do you know what country he's from? He's Thai, yeah. And it was about karma, and he basically was saying it was a false belief to say that, and I know there's disagreement on this, but his interpretation, I guess, of the Buddha's teachings is that not everything that happens to a person is karma vipaka, like the outcome of your actions.
Not at all. It's correct.
Yeah. And one of the things the Buddha said is don't try and figure out karma vipaka, because it'll make your head split open, because there's so many variables. But I guess I'm just sensitive to this because in my career, I just saw so many people being sort of blamed or put down, like say if they had mental illness or something, like it was just something they'd done wrong or bad, or it was their karma or whatever. And it just didn't sit, that was just so uncomfortable for me to hear people blaming people for, their situation and just saying, oh, it's your bad karma, well, people use the word karma for karma vipaka. Karma is actually the action and the outcome is vipaka. So it's just it's a sore spot that gets poked in me when people look at others and say, oh, this is because, you've done something bad. And so I just go back to what the Buddha said, that, we don't know for sure, but definitely what we want to do is to be investigating, is what I'm doing at this moment. Is it causing harm to self or others? Is there ill will here? Things like that. And how can I change that? So that's what I want to focus on. I don't want to go around pointing fingers.
there's a, I think sometimes we get muddled. There's a big difference between blame and responsibility. We are all responsible, 100% responsible for our situation and for our mind. But, in terms of blame, it's a non-issue because everything is causes and conditions. So there's no beginning and there's no end. So there's no first perpetrator. We've all done so many bad things, all of us, like incredible. And this is all very linked to non-self. It's a sort of a package. But for me, the separating out blame and responsibility, my parents are responsible for how they parented, but there's no blame there because their parents also, it's just like a defilement conduit. It's just a defilement train. And so there's no blame, but the minute you really take these teachings on board, there's such an immediate freedom. Like, oh, I don't need to be blaming my parents, and I actually don't need to be blaming myself for the way I parented. I just need to get honest about the dire situation here and start cleaning it up. And yeah, it's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, these hindrances, this is the world. I mean, this is why we've got climate change, greed and hatred. It's why we have wars. It's just a defilement soup. It's a stew, and we've been cooking in it for eons. And then, wow, somehow we've come in contact with the Dhamma. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we can start to take responsibility and clean things up. Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah, I think I would say I agree. I mean, the teachings have provided me with a sense of, not speaking when it's not, the right speech, and as well as watching your blame, really watching your blame. And, Lori and I really want to make effort to sort of say, well, this is what we're doing, instead of wanting to blame. So, yeah, it's tough.
but it's great as we, this links into the hindrance of remorse that we were talking about. When you start to ease up on the blame pedal out, you can start easing up on it in too, and then you can get more and more honest. It's really these are radical. It's radical and so awesome. Yeah.
The bliss of blamelessness. I just love that. It's such a freeing, blissful. It's blissful.
And you were mentioning about proliferation of the mind, like investigation. Like it's best done when we still the mind, like when we're sitting in meditation and quiet and still the mind. And so sometimes there's, it's not even much thinking. It's more, experiencing like, oh, when I do this harmful thing, you feel how the negative outcome of that. So it's, yeah. Anything from the Zoom room?
I'm confused about investigation.
Mhm.
Does this mean that when something arises while I'm meditating, I try to investigate it, or does it mean that I try to keep my mind on my meditation object and investigate it later?
Yeah. It depends what your goal is when you're sitting down for that meditation. If you're wanting to still the mind, then you're going to let things that are coming in, you're just going to let them go, unless, they're just they're screaming so loudly that you're unable to, let them go. Then the skillful thing would be to investigate at that moment. Yeah,
Sarah, it is a bit of an art to know when to attend to something that's percolating up and when to. I think the instructions I've heard, like say there's a fear, in the chest or the throat, or a pain in the leg, or some anxiety. The instructions I've heard is if you can be with that. I mean, not that that's your meditation object, but that's in the picture because it's happening. So you're with your meditation object, and if you can have that be there without aversion coming up, then just carry on with the meditation, being with the meditation object, and that is happening. But if there's starting to be annoyance, aversion, discouragement, like, oh, I can't believe that thing again, or whatever, if you're not being able to have that be in the picture without aversion arising, that can be an indicator. Oh, I think I need to now shift and have that be the primary focus of attention. And again, trying to be still and calm and welcoming of it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And I think the point of that is that the sustained attention on a primary meditation object, that is the training. And that if that training gains momentum, we're going to have purity and power and insights that will be so much better than our little current, oh, what's happening here? Like our current level of investigation.
Okay, we'll end with our Brahma Vihara of Upekkha, equanimity. So if you can bring to mind a person you have neutral feelings about, you can send these phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. Now think of someone who's been very supportive of you and direct the phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. Now think of a friend, perhaps another friend. And send the phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. And now bring to mind someone you have a very difficult relationship with and send the phrases to them. You are the owner of your karma. Your happiness and unhappiness depend upon your actions, not upon my wishes for you. I care for you too as a suffering human being, but I cannot keep you from suffering. I wish you too true happiness, but I cannot make your choices for you. And now we'll send the phrases to ourselves. I am the owner of my karma. My happiness and unhappiness depend on my actions, not my wishes or hopes. I care for myself, and I am determined to follow the path of peace, the Noble Eightfold Path. I wish myself happiness, and I am determined to make skillful choices. All beings are owners of their karma. The happiness and unhappiness of all beings depends upon their actions, not upon my wishes for them. I care for all beings as suffering beings, but I cannot keep them from suffering. I wish all beings true happiness, but I cannot make their choices for them. May the merit of our practice be shared with all sentient beings, named and unnamed. Lynn and Claire, Grace,
Amen. Joker.
Corey, Therese,
No, that's not-
Russell, Simon.
Kathy. Joker. Kika.
May all beings be well and happy. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Mm.